Hello and welcome to everybody on Cloud Fitness. So in today's video, I am going to cover the most asked topic. So basically, I'll be creating now play series of interview questions on different topic. So today's video is specifically built for Azure Data Factory, and this will be the part 1 in that. So when I say it is part 1, slowly and steadily, I will actually try to increase the complexity of the questions. We will move towards scenario-based questions from the basic questions when we talk about Azure Data Factory. And in the similar way, the same thing I'll do for even the Databricks and other Azure technologies as well. So most of you have actually approached me to make video on Azure Data Factory interview questions. So here it is, and let's go ahead, move with the basic interview questions when we talk about Azure Data Factory. So the very first question that comes along is, what is an Azure Data Factory? As I already told that this will be the basics, and slowly and slowly we'll move towards the scenario based questions, so that even if a person is coming for the first time just to see how Azure Data Factory interview questions look like, that person will again understand a lot of concepts about Azure Data Factory. So what is exactly Azure Data Factory, right? So it is definitely a cloud-based ETL tool. That is something that you can definitely go ahead and explain, that it is a cloud-based ETL or even an ELT service. So what it does, it is fully managed by Azure. It is serverless. It helps in the data integration part. It helps in orchestrating our solutions. Not just that, you can also transform your data, right? So ETL part, when you talk about extract, transform and load, this is what is your ETL, right? Or your ELT, extract, load and transform. So using Azure Data Factory, you have a lot of different connectors, over 200 plus connectors you have. You can integrate your Azure Data Factory with the multiple services, extract the data from those services. You can build pipelines out of it. Now these pipelines are actually your ELT pipelines usually that we create, and in this ELT pipelines, we actually take in the data, we ingest the data, we prepare it. When I say we prepare it, we have multiple transformations, we have multiple activities which helps us in managing the data, which helps us in transforming the data, and then we can go ahead. Again, we have 200 plus connectors to load our data to the different services. We can load our data to the database, we can load our data to the cloud service itself, right? So this is a very small introduction of what exactly your Azure Data Factory is. Yes, you can build your ETL pipelines, you can build your ELT pipelines, you can orchestrate also. So when I say orchestrate, you can build the flow. When I say orchestrating or building the flow, it essentially means that defining how your data will flow. So you have a set of data, you have your data set, you want it to flow from one particular storage account to another storage account. That is called your orchestration. So this is just an example. It can be anything. It can be a database as well, right? So that is an orchestration. You can monitor those pipelines that you have created. So this is basically your cloud-based ELT or ETL tool, which is fully managed, which is serverless. It helps you to ingest data. It helps you to transform data. It helps you to build orchestration pipelines as well. So this is the very first question of this play series. So now going ahead, the second question that is very commonly asked is, what is a linked service? So if you want to have a particular definition, then you already have it on your screen. But I really believe that if you understand things, it will be very easy for you to explain. So when I talk about linked service, and what essentially Azure Data Factory is doing, it is trying to connect to a particular data source, and then it is trying to load it somewhere, right? And in between, you are trying to do some transformation. Now that connection part is your linked service. So when I say connection part, let's say you have XYZ data source. Now you want that data source to be connected to the data factory, right? So how that connection is established? That connection is nothing but just your linked service. So let's say you have your Azure, let's say you have your on-prem SQL DB, right? Now you want to connect to that particular DB. In that case, the connection string for that database will actually come inside your linked service. So linked service is doing nothing. It is just providing you the configurations or the connection details to your source or your sink. So whenever you're trying to create a pipeline, whenever you are trying to build an ETL solution, you go ahead and you build the connection, and then that connection is typically your linked service. And in fact, the same is shown over here in this particular diagram. What you see on the screen right now is essentially an overview of how your ETL pipeline or your ELT pipeline works, right? So you create a linked service. So let's say you're creating your linked service for the SQL server. You are defining your connection that this is my SQL server. You go ahead, you log in, right? So that login credentials are basically your linked service. Now this link service, once you have defined that, please go ahead and take the data from my SQL server, then after that you essentially go ahead and define which exact table you want to take the data from, right? In SQL server you might have multiple schemas, right? Inside that you might want to go ahead and take the data from a particular set of tables. So now that particular set or the pointer to that particular data set is actually called your data set. So first you go ahead, you build your link service in your data factory, then you go ahead and point to the exact data. So that is something called as your data set. And once you go ahead and define your data set, you can start processing your data. You can start processing your data with the help of different activities, which we are going to discuss. And after that, you have, the whole set of pipelines that you go ahead and build. So the next question that comes over here is, what is data set? So this is also one of the, very commonly asked questions. So these are the basic questions which are definitely asked to you. After that, an interviewer will slowly move towards your, scenario-based questions. So I've already defined you what exactly a data set is, right? And this is, you need to remember that you have to understand both these concepts of link service and data set, because most of the time they will actually ask you in some other way. Let's say they might ask you what is the difference between a link service and a data set, right? So that difference is also comes from the basic thing, what essentially these two, data set and link services, do, right? So when you talk about data set, it is nothing but the pointer to your data. So let's say I am saying that please go to Databricks. So let's say my Databricks is my source. I have to take the data from Databricks. Let's say I have to run a notebook from a Databricks, right? Now in that case, the link service is actually connection to the Databricks, and the pointer to my exact location of the notebook inside Databricks is the data set. Or in terms of SQL Server, let's say you are trying to define the connection strings of the SQL Server. In that case, connection string is your link service. But once the connection is established, which exact table you want to load or what set of tables you want to load, that is actually called your data set. So this is pretty much about your link service and data set. After that, another concept comes in, that is called your integration runtime. So now when I talk about integration runtime, in fact, it will be much better if side by side I go to the portal and I also show you what did I exactly mean about when I say what is the link service data set. In fact, we can go ahead and build a very small basic pipelines to just understand what it exactly meant, right? So let me go to the Azure portal and show you how we can do that. So just now I have deployed a data factory instance. So let me go to the data factory, right? And at the same time, I have defined our two storage accounts. So let's say I want to take data from one storage account and load it into another, right? So for that purpose, I can essentially go ahead and build a data factory pipeline out of it, right? Now guys, if you see, this is exactly the data factory, how your data factory UI looks like, and you click on this author icon over here. This is the place where you can build your pipelines, and you can also see there is an option for the pipelines over here, and you have an option for your data sets. So we have already talked about your data sets, we have already talked about your pipelines, and similarly on the left hand side, if you click on this manage option, on the right hand side this toolbox, then also you can see on the left hand side there are linked service as well, right? So these are the three things that we have discussed till now. So let's go ahead and try to create a pipeline, right? So I'll just click on new pipeline over here. I'm like creating a really basic pipelines that can be just done in a very short amount of time. And you can see I have just opened, I've just taken one particular activity from here, copy data, that I want to do. I want to do copy data, right? So if you see here, there's an option of source, right? And it asks you for source data set. So right now we have not created any source data set, right? So we can go ahead, click on this new option over here. And as I already told you, it has more than 200 connectors. So you can see whatever you name it, it has it over here, right? So right now I have already created a data lake storage gen 2. So this is my storage. storage. So I have selected my storage. Let's click on continue, and let's say I have a text file, so I'm just selecting binary option over here. Like, you can select from whatever file you have, and similarly it will ask you for a linked service as well. Now you understand what is source data set. It is a pointer to your data. Now it is a pointer to your data, and linked service is exactly what it is, a connection. So first you have to establish a connection, then only you can define the exact pointer, right? So for that, let's click on new. It will actually show you a new linked service, right? So let me, after that, you can actually see there are a list of configurations over here to basically add, right? So now if you see over here, there is another option is integration runtime, right? Connect via integration runtime. So this is the another interview question that is very much as what is exactly integration runtime. We are going to discuss it in a bit. So we will select auto dissolve integration runtime, and let's go ahead, select the subscriptions, select the storage account name. Let's say I want to take the data from ADF storage account YT, and then let's test the connection. So the moment you start testing the connection, it will actually show you whether your connection is successful or not. So let's say your connection is successful over here. Let's click on create. So there are multiple configurations over here which we can discuss, but right now it's just a demo where I just want to explain you what is what, right? It's completely from the interview perspective. Now, if you see, linked service is created. So this is the name of my linked service, right? You can write whatever name you want. I have a connection now. And since I want to define a data set, I have to mention exact path. So I can go ahead, browse it. And once I browse, I have a folder or a container called as test inside my storage account, and there I have sa_bhavna.txt. So I'm checking that particular option. So you see that I've already selected this particular data set. Now you see in this particular storage account, I have this sa_bhavna.txt, right? So I've just selected that particular data set. Now let's click on OK. So now you will see that it says that my source data set is of binary format, and all the configurations I have provided it over here, right? And similarly, I can go ahead and have a sync data set. So now I don't like, see, Data Factory doesn't know where it has to put the data, right? So again, it has to go ahead and create a data set. So let's click on new, and I want to put my data set again in a storage container, and again I want to put it in a text format, and again I have to create a linked service. So the previous linked service was a connection to a specific storage account. Now this linked service is for the different storage account, right? So let's click. So I want to load my data in ADF storage account YT02, right? So I'll click that, and I'll go ahead, test my connection, and I'll create this particular linked service, right? Now, once I have created this particular link service, let's click on OK. And then you can see that in the data set on the left hand side, you have this binary 1 and binary 2, right? So if you want, you can validate whatever flow that you have created. And after that, if you want to save anything, you can just click on publish all. It will actually show you the changes that you want to save, and then you can go ahead and start publishing. Also, now you can see that you have built a pipeline, so you know what exactly a pipeline is. Then what you have done, you have created a data set, you know what a data set is. Now again, if you go back to the manage tab, you have created two linked service on the fly, right? So these are the two linked service which has appeared over here. So this is what is called your pipeline. Even this is a very small basic pipeline, right? Now I'll go back to the same PPT, and we will discuss regarding integration runtime. So whatever I've shown you till now is just so that you understand that what exactly we have discussed, right? There is no point in discussing just the questions and answer without showing you anything, right? So that is why I've discussed with a bit of hands-on. So coming on to the integration runtime, and you have already seen that when we created a linked service, it actually asked you to select from integration runtime, right? So integration runtime is nothing but a compute service. So it is basically, there are some set of activities you are going to perform, right? So in our case, we were trying to copy the data from one storage account to another. So now this copy is basically An activity, right? It requires some compute environment. It requires some set of virtual machines to work on, right? So from where do you get it? You get it from your integration runtime. So it actually acts as a bridge between your activity and the linked service object. It is from where your any activity that you do will actually start. So this is basically a compute environment. So this is one part or one definition of integration runtime, and we have also seen on the portal where exactly you get the integration runtime from, right? And you need to understand that the very next question that comes to everybody the moment they ask you about your integration runtime is, what are the different types of integration runtime, right? If there aren't integration runtimes, then there will be different types of integration runtime, right? So the very first one is Azure self-hosted, and then you have Azure SSIS. So if I go back, in fact, I should go back and I'll show you what integration runtime that we have selected. So in fact, you can go to the manage option over here, and then you will see in the integration runtimes tab over here, you will see that I have an auto resolve integration runtime already set up, right? So this auto-resolve integration runtimes comes default by Azure. So any service that you are trying to integrate within Azure network, that can be handled by Azure itself, and for that you will actually use Azure auto-resolve integration runtime. So since my storage account was in Azure, right, and so to connect to that, I can easily go ahead and use auto resolve integration runtime. And in the similar way, if you click on the new option over here, you will also see an option of self-hosted as well as Azure SSIS. Right, SSIS is basically for your SSIS packages. If you are trying to execute your SSIS package, so most of the people would have worked on SSIS. Another on-prem technology, if you have used that, in that case, if you are trying to lift and shift any SSIS package, you will establish the connection through integration runtime. Right, and in case you are trying to do some cloud to cloud migration within Azure, in that case you will go for Azure integration or auto resolve integration runtime. And the third one is self-hosted. So self-hosted is basically when you are trying to define the integration runtime, that is basically called as self-hosted. So when do you use self-hosted? So you basically use self-hosted integration runtime whenever you are trying to connect to your on-prem. Right, in that case you go for self-hosted integration runtimes. Now these three questions are actually in series questions. So this is also a very commonly asked question, that what are the types of integration runtime that you will use to load the data. Like let's say when you are trying to, they will give you some like interviewers might give you some kind of example, right? The question will not be very straightforward. They will give you some example, right? They will ask you, like let's say you want to migrate the data from your some on-prem resource to Azure or on-prem resource to AWS. So what kind of integration runtime you will use? They will definitely go ahead and ask this question. So in that case, you need to be very clear in your mind. So whenever you're talking about on-prem, you will go for your self-hosted integration runtime. And similarly, if you are dealing with SSIS, you will go for your SSIS integration runtime. Otherwise, if everything is on Azure, you can easily go ahead and use auto resolve integration runtime. And auto resolve integration runtime has its own benefits. So we will not go much in detail in this particular video. Slowly and steadily, we will increase the complexity. Now, coming on to the next question, which is regarding the triggers in Azure Data Factory. So, of course, you have built a pipeline, right? We have created, let's say, a copy activity. We have created a copy pipeline over here. Now, you don't want to go ahead and manually run that particular pipeline in any tool, right? It's not just about ADF. So, for that, you do have triggers. So these triggers are something that will definitely be asked to you in any ADF interview. So you should be very clear on these triggers concept. So when I talk about these triggers, there are three different type of triggers. Triggers, by the name itself, you understand that it is going to execute something, right? So there are three different types of triggers, which is called your event trigger, your tumbling window trigger, and your schedule trigger. We will go ahead and see what exactly it is. So when we talk about event trigger, with the name itself, you can understand that whenever there is any kind of event happening, in that case, it will automatically trigger, right? It will execute your pipeline. So you have to define an event. Let's say your file comes inside a blob storage. The moment file comes inside your blob storage, you want to trigger a particular pipeline. So you can define that. So that is an event. So coming of a file inside your blob storage is an event. So based on that event, your ADF pipeline will trigger. Similarly, you have your tumbling window trigger. So when I talk about tumbling window, you can actually execute your pipeline even for the historical data. So that comes under your tumbling window trigger. So it has a like you can specify the window period. So in that window period, you can go ahead and execute your pipelines. And similarly, you have your schedule trigger. So when I talk about schedule trigger, it is like a very simple method. Mostly on-prem technologies used to use it. Schedule trigger. You want to let's say trigger your pipeline at 1 a.m. every day, right? In that case, you will go for schedule trigger. Now, in fact, I can go ahead and show you how we can work on triggers. So if you see, there is an option in the pipeline itself. If you see, we have an option of add trigger, right? I can go ahead and trigger it right now, or I can click on new and edit. So let's click on new and edit, and you see that it will ask you to add a trigger. In this case, you can click on new, and here it will ask you for the type of trigger, right? So storage event, custom events, tumbling window, and schedule, right? So let's say I want to schedule it for some time, or let's say let's click on storage event. So if I click on storage event, it will actually ask you for the details of the storage account. So when I say a file comes in your blob storage, so it will ask you for the connection details of or your storage account name, or what exactly is the file that you want to check for, right? So let's say I'm randomly selecting it right now, and let's click over here. I'm selecting one particular storage account, and inside it I have a container name as test, right? Now, in fact, there is a particular format. If you hover over this icon, it will actually show you that in which particular format it can be. So let's do it. And now it is in the correct format. And then it will ask you blob path begins with. So it is essentially asking you, you can hover over this eye icon. It is essentially asking you the name of your CSV file, right? So let me name it as test.txt, right? And then it will ask you for an event. What kind of event? When this file is added to the blob, or when this file is deleted from the blob. So let's click on this blob created, and remember that even blob is nothing but just a storage format. So in terms of Azure, when I say blob created, it essentially means that a file is created, that a file with this name is created, right? And then I can click on continue, right? So the moment I click on continue, it will go ahead and validate the configurations which we have provided. In fact, if you see, it is actually trying to check whether this test.txt file is present or not. But right now, if I go to my blob storage, if I go to my storage account, I do not have that file. So let me go ahead and upload that file first. In this upload option, I'll go ahead and upload a test.txt file, and then we will see how does it work. And here is my test.txt file. Let me click on upload. And while the time it is uploading, we will go ahead. Let me go back and click on continue again. So let it refresh for some time. And you will see that it says one blob mashed in text. And it is actually showing me the test.txt file. So let's click on continue, click on OK. And then let's say publish all. Right? Publishing basically here means that you are trying to save the changes. It is not integrated to any Git or any repository right now. We will talk about that in the later stage. It's a very basic stage right now. So right now all the changes are saved, and I have a trigger over here. Right? So the moment if I go ahead and I upload a test.txt file over here, you will actually see that this pipeline runs because of the trigger. So guys, you can actually see that I have re-added the file. So the moment the file is added, if I go to the monitor tab on the left hand side, you will see this monitor tab. You can actually see that it has triggered it. So right now, all the settings were just random. So don't think that it failed. So the main motive over here is to show you that it got triggered, right? So if you click on the pipeline, you can actually see all this stuff. And this is also something that we have to discuss. we will discuss this in detail as well. So you can see how triggers work, right? And in fact, if you go to this monitor tab, you will see how many triggers have happened, and you can see that this is the trigger name, what is the name of the trigger, what happened during the trigger. This is all related to your triggers. So I'll go back to the PPT, and in fact I will show you it through a diagram where you can actually see that what are the different components involved in Azure Data Factory. So you create integration runtime, which you have on the left hand side. You create an integration runtime, you create a linked service, you create data sets, and whenever you have these pipelines, then what you do exactly is you create triggers for those pipelines, because you do not want to manually execute that. And there are three types of trigger: event trigger, schedule trigger, and tumbling window trigger. So tumbling window is also something that you can go ahead and try, because these tumbling window triggers are very useful in case you want to you want to run it for any historical data as well. You can mention the window for that particular trigger, and it will also run for your historical dates. So guys, this is pretty much that I wanted to cover in this particular video. Do let me know any thoughts, any comments. In fact, see, I think you all should know that I cannot respond to almost every person for sure. But yes, definitely I try to make something out of your comments, because a lot of people have emailed me regarding these interview series. That is why I am here. But yes, I have got in fact a response on the autoloader and Databricks and all. I am trying to make video whenever I get time. I go ahead and I try to make video out of it. So do remember to like, subscribe and share. Thank you so much for being till here.